Honk honk. uh, I am still Eric Darling with Eric Darling Data, and I am going to continue my series of things that lie to you in cached plans. And in this one, I want to talk about what happens when you use a stored procedure to execute either a dynamic SQL or other stored procedures. That's the sub executions, right? You know, like it's not the main execution; it's an execution within an execution. Sometimes within an execution, it's executions all the way down. Right? All right. Cool. So I have this store procedure thoughtfully named PCLSub, which is plan cache liar underscore sub, right? Sub executions, not subpar or anything like that. But I've gone ahead and run it ahead of time, and the output here is just to show that we looped through some code 20 times. Now, on its own, that is very unimpressive. Anyone can write a loop, but I want to show you what happened or what query plans look like when in the plan cache when we use a store procedure to call other store procedures. So again, we're going to see this low cost, high CPU warning, and maybe I should have included this in that section instead. I don't know, but this one has a little bit more going on, so I decided to give it its own thing. But it costs 0 query bucks because really doesn't do anything other than execute other stuff. But if we go over here a little bit further, we'll see that for one execution, we used a total of 75 seconds of CPU time, and the same thing on average because that divided by 1, anything divided by 1 is itself. Good. Yeah, all right, good on that. And we had a total duration of about 20, well, let's call it about 21 seconds there, 20.7. I can round up on that one. I can also do that math, right? Pretty good there. But when we look at the query plan, we can see some stuff going on, just not anything terribly helpful. We can see that we start a while loop here, and depending on that, we execute a procedure or execute a different procedure, and then occasionally we print something out. What really sucks is if we go to look at the text of this stored procedure, it's going to look like that. While 1 is less than 20, boof, do nothing. Not very helpful at all, is it? Well, we can look at the text of the query from over here, the actual query text. And I'm going to do a little bit of parsing here in front of you, nice people. Let's get the while loop down here, and let's show that we declare some dynamic SQL and run it over here. And let's take a careful note that we have this comment in there for dbo.sub, so we know that that dynamic SQL is run from dbo.sub. There is one exec, we exec sp execute SQL, and here is another exec where we call another stored procedure. Good stuff, right? So we see exactly where those other execs are, and we see exactly what we were executing within the store procedure. So good for us. So now we can go look for some things. The first thing we're going to go look for is the store procedure that we called within there, called sub. And if we go grab sub, we will see that select count, or the select count that's inside the store procedure, and we can see that it executed 10 times within sub, and that it used a total of about 32 seconds, or let's call it 30. Let's continue our rounding up extravaganza. About 33 seconds of CPU time, and about 32 seconds on average. So over 10 executions, we used 3.3, whatever. Look at the numbers. Do the math, all right? Come on. And that each execution on average, my brain is broken. On average, it took 822 milliseconds for a total of about 8.2 seconds total. So we've tracked that down. Now let's track down that statement. Right. So let's run SP Blitz Cache, and let's use a couple of the less frequently used parameters there. Now we can use query filter to filter down to get procs or statements, and we can use minimum execution count to tell SQL Server to ignore code that has executed less than a certain number of times. So we'll do that here, and as long as the plan cache didn't clear out for some weird reason, we will get two things. We will get the text of the we'll get the statement from sub, right? So we have this statement here, which is the count from there. And we have the dynamic SQL, which has that dbo.sub comment in it. So we can see that where we added that comment there, so we would know where that query came from. And if we look at that query over here, or look at the metadata for that query over here, we'll see that that also ran 10 times, that this one used about 42 seconds of CPU time total, for about 4.2 seconds on average, and the average and totals will, they will multiply cleanly by 10 as well. So good for us there. We have started to figure this stuff out, and if we look at everything in the database as a whole, I mean, don't look at it as a whole. It might be quite completely filled in. We will have the store procedure sub. We will have one of the statements from within sub, and then we will have the procedure that sub calls. So let's just focus on these top 3 lines here, because these should give us enough information. Where we have the one execution of that of the main store procedure resulted in 10 executions apiece of those 2 pieces of subcode, and if we add up the CPU from those 2 pieces, we will get about that 75,000 number. And the same thing with that. Well, the average doesn't quite work out because we're still dividing by 1, and that doesn't quite work out. It's difficult to figure that out. But the total duration will also add up to there. So main lessons here there are a few things going on. One, if you use a store procedure to call dynamic SQL or other store procedures, it will inherit the metadata of those store procedures, and that, like, the runtime, the CPU, duration, reads, writes, all that stuff will tally up to that main calling store procedure. That can be pretty misleading if you see a store procedure that costs nothing but does a lot of work internally, and then you have to go kind of figure out what inside that store procedure does all that work internally. Now, there are other things that can cause this too. It's not like while loops, cursors, things of that nature can also contribute to this phenomenon. But it's important to realize, that when the sub executions push their runtime, push their metrics up to the thing that calls them, and that can be sort of confusing when you're looking for expensive things to tune, and you look at this store procedure and you're like, oh, it's just the stuff inside of it. And sometimes when you if you use just the query plan to look at the text of something, it can be truncated and is very unhelpful. So this is another case in where the plan cache can be pretty unclear about what's going on with something. We have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what inside of the store procedure was going wild and crazy. All right, cool. All right, that does it for this one. In the next video, we will talk about something brand new too. Woohoo! Yay! We're gonna do it all day. I mean, by it, I mean record demos. You sick son of a gun. All right. See you in the next video. Goodbye.